So this is the Oslo project update. There's our information. And we have a few other Oslo folks in the room, so hopefully they can answer any specific questions. So this is just a quick introduction to the project. Basically, it's the repository for all of the common code in OpenStack. So if we have two projects that are trying to do basically the same thing, we try to factor that code out and stick it in an Oslo library, and that way it's only being maintained in one place, and we have the Oslo team that's kind of designed around taking care of that code. So we actually have kind of two different types of cores on the Oslo team. We have the overall Oslo cores that have +2 on all of the repos, and then we have project-specific cores, and that's for people who are experts in a specific area, but maybe don't have time or the inclination to contribute to all of the huge number of Oslo projects. So one interesting thing I learned actually while I was researching this was independent contributors are a huge chunk of the Oslo code base. I think for Rocky it was like the third largest contributor group. I don't remember who was 1 and 2. So, but anyway, we have a lot of independent contributors, which is nice. Like I said, we have a lot of projects. There's around 40 in governance. There might be a few more Git repos than that even. And then there's the wiki page, and that has a few more details about the team and a list of all the projects and a quick description of them. So I know this came up in the onboarding session yesterday that people don't know what's available from Oslo just because there's so many projects, and it's like, well, okay, so I need to do this thing. Does Oslo have it? The wiki is probably the best place to go. There's also a list of projects on the docs page, which I just found out yesterday is also useful. It's very similar to what's on the wiki, but it's machine generated, so it should always be up to date. And that's just in the libraries section of the docs page. Okay. So things we did in Queens. There was a lot of work around Kafka and adding support to that in Oslo messaging. So you can read the spec there. It was experimental for this, so we're not quite recommending that in production yet, but we're working towards that. It's a notification-only driver. I believe that's just a fundamental design of Kafka. It's not really suitable for RPC. And so we have it in CI, and we are testing it with Oslo messaging now. So it's getting there. We had a lot of policy work in Queens. So one of them was this external policy decision point, and basically that was having policy managed somewhere outside of, we have policy.json, policy.yaml, and this was to add support for, the specific one was something called Moon, and it was used, I think, by the NFV project. And so they wanted to manage all of their policy for all of the OpenStack and the related projects there in the same place. And so they wanted a way to have Oslo policy call their thing instead of using its own internal stuff. And so that's what that was. And that one is completely implemented. It's all there. Actually, a lot of the work was on the Moon side, so we didn't have to do too much, but it is there now. We also did some work to allow policy deprecation, since that's essentially a configuration thing. We wanted to have comparable functionality to what we have in Oslo config for deprecating options. So you can see an example of how you would do that. You've got the same deprecated rule and reason in the version where it was deprecated. So it's very similar to what we have in Oslo config if you're familiar with that. And then another policy thing, we added a scope option to the policy rules. And Lance is probably the one to talk to about that if you want to know details, but basically it's a new feature so that operators can have a little bit more control over how their policy works. Lance is right there, not back there. Wow. Okay. Right. So things we're working on for Rocky. We have some work underway to add support for other drivers to Oslo config. Up till now, it's only supported INI format files. We've had some requests. Well, we've had a long-standing request, in particular, to encrypt secrets in config files, and the driver support is actually how we've gone about doing that. What's going to happen is there will be a plugin that can talk to Castellan, which is another Oslo project, and then that will go out to a secret key store and retrieve your secrets at runtime, so you don't have to have them actually on the system. So that's a pretty big piece of work. We're still in the implementation phase on that one, and not entirely clear when that's going to be done, but we're making progress there. We actually had a work session yesterday about it. And so yeah, there's a separate spec for the plain text passwords piece of that work. So they're kind of two different things, but they're related. There's also in the config library a version migration tool being written. And basically what that will do, since we have all of that information about what was deprecated in the cycle, it'll take your old configuration file and move all of those options over to their new version. So it's just kind of some automation to make upgrades a little bit easier. And so for Oslo messaging, we did remove the Pika driver already this cycle, and we deprecated the ZeroMQ driver. ZeroMQ has been kind of semi-maintained for years now, and we've finally gotten to the point where we think we have nobody who's actually maintaining it, and we're pretty sure nobody's using it because it doesn't actually work with the current versions of OpenStack. It's missing some messaging features that are required by services now. So that one will be going away in the future, and we recommend you don't use it now. So we're continuing work on the Kafka driver as well. There's a new RPC call monitoring feature, and that should be really helpful for long-running operations. Ken's probably the one to talk to about that if you want details, but basically it's just like a keep alive monitoring system. So when you have a long-running RPC call, the thing that's doing the work is going to periodically call back and say, hey, yep, I'm still alive, don't time out yet. And that way, if the thing that's doing the work goes away, you know faster than having to wait for the entire RPC timeout. So that should be a really nice feature. And I think that one's actually already merged, right?
Yeah, it works for Rabbit. We just have some work with the other drivers.
Right, okay. Yeah, so that one in Oslo Messaging Master, that one works for Rabbit, and we have work underway to add support to the other drivers. It hasn't been released yet, I don't believe, because it just merged last week. And then around PBR, because that's another thing that Oslo is responsible for, we are removing the Sphinx integration, the new Python PTI for, well, that's redundant. The new PTI says you're supposed to be calling build Sphinx directly, not through PBR. So we're hoping to get rid of that feature. It's caused a lot of maintenance headaches over the years because we try to support a huge range of Sphinx versions, and it's just kind of a mess. So that's going away, and everybody should just use Sphinx directly. And then the versioned requirements files was a thing that we had to implement kind of as a stopgap for before pip and all of the Python installer tools had support for the version identifiers in requirements files. So now that all of those tools have that, we don't really need the version requirements files anymore. So those will be going away, and that's like the requirements-py3.txt files. Yeah, well, environment markers were the replacement for this. Yeah. So yeah, you don't need to use these anymore, so please don't. So future work, we have the Oslo.limit, and that's for unified quotas and things like that. So we're hoping, we have kind of different quota implementations in all of the different projects. We're hoping to get all of that kind of consolidated down into this one library and hopefully simplify that whole area, because it's not a particularly good one right now, and it's a pain point for operators because not every service works the same way. The Oslo config drivers work is probably going to extend out over multiple cycles here. We have other drivers that we want to write too. Right now we're focused on some of the initial ones, but there will be more coming. For Oslo messaging, we have the messaging primitives, and that's actually going to be kind of a separate API in Oslo messaging. So right now we've got the notifications API and the RPC API. This is going to hopefully provide a common way to do lower level messaging, because we found out, I think kind of recently, that there's actually quite a few projects that are writing like directly against the Pika driver or the Kombu driver, or one of the lower level messaging drivers, and we don't really want people to have to do that, so we're going to try to provide a common way in Oslo messaging, and that way it's abstracted out. So if people do want to use different backends, you're not hard coded in the project to something like Rabbit, because Ken did a great presentation yesterday about some edge messaging stuff, which Rabbit is not a good fit for, but there are some other messaging technology that work a lot better for that. So ideally, we'd like to keep this abstracted and not have people writing directly against one specific messaging provider. And so yeah, I guess there's some details there about what would be in that API. And I think that's it for that one. So cross-project work for Oslo, it's all of it. Everything Oslo does is cross-project. That's kind of the whole purpose of Oslo. So maybe obvious, but I just wanted to point it out. So obviously, as we do the Oslo.limit implementation, we'll need to be getting that adopted in all of the projects. So that's going to be a significant piece of work, I'm sure, especially since everybody does have their own different quotas and they all work slightly different. So it'll be hard to get everybody onto the same system, but it's going to be worth it. So I expect that'll be a significant piece of work for Oslo going forward. The Oslo config drivers, we're probably not going to get that all finished this cycle. So, well, no, okay, that was from the previous slide. I believe there may be a little bit of work needed in the other projects to actually do the secret storage outside of the config files. So obviously we'll be helping out with that, and because Oslo work is generally not considered complete until it's actually being adopted by OpenStack. So we try to help out with that. So we're not just writing all this code and then throwing it out there and saying, well, we hope somebody uses it. We try to make sure that we're helping push that along too. And then obviously just generally, we need to clean up all of the deprecated functionality in anywhere that it's being used. Like right now, we are removing mock stub out because of the mocks removal community goal. So we're going around and trying to get rid of that in all of the projects, and it's been deprecated in Oslo test. So people will start seeing warnings about that. And any help with these kind of things is always welcome too. A lot of these patches aren't all that complicated. It just takes time. So we always appreciate help. So there's also a bunch of work going on in the deployment frameworks to support some of these new Oslo messaging features. Like I know there was a patch recently that went into OOO that allowed support for the split RPC and notifications, so that you can use different backends that are better suited to those use cases. I don't know, did you have anything more you wanted to say on that?
I'd just say that work is ongoing to make it easy to deploy Oslo messaging through the various, so many different frameworks. We've got DevStack done. Triple O is getting completed. We're working on Ansible. And some other stuff.
All right. So that's all underway, and we'll be continuing. So keep an eye out for that. So that's our Launchpad address. All of the Oslo projects actually are under the Oslo group. We don't show up on Launchpad as part of the OpenStack organization because projects can only have one organization, and because of the number of Oslo projects that we have, we wanted to keep them all, somewhat manageable. So we put them under their own group. So that's where you can find those. I expect we'll probably be migrating to Storyboard in the near future. I know Doug has expressed that he's happy with where Storyboard is now, so I expect we'll start looking into doing that, and we'll probably do that all at once, just move all of the Oslo projects over there. And so you'll have still one place to find Oslo, it'll just be a new place. We're in OpenStack Oslo on Freenode, and we use the Oslo tag on OpenStack Dev for mailing list traffic. So that's how to get a hold of us. So if you're interested in contributing, an important thing to know is none of the Oslo cores right now are full-time on Oslo. Even I'm not, and I'm the PTL. So it's kind of a nice project in that way because it's a collection of smaller projects. You can contribute to just some of the smaller projects, and it doesn't require quite the same investment of time that Nova or Neutron would. Since those are really big projects, and it takes there's a steep learning curve just to be able to contribute to those. Some of the Oslo projects are actually very small and very targeted, so it's a lot easier to ramp up on them, and so it's an easier project to kind of contribute to on the side. And so if you are interested, find an Oslo project. We're looking for help with Oslo Service, Oslo PrivSep. If you're interested in security stuff, that's a good one. TaskFlow is in use and is in perpetual need of more contributors. So find a project that sounds interesting. Look at the reviews. Go out and look at the bugs. Fix them if you can. That's even better. And so we, as I mentioned earlier, we actually have project-specific cores. So I mean, if you do become a regular contributor to one of the individual projects, we're happy to make you a core on that project. And if, like Ken, you continue to contribute to even more of Oslo, then we'll make you a general Oslo core. So yeah, I think that's my pitch for contributing to Oslo. Any questions? All right, guess I covered it all.